Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan, here on the RealityBitesRadio.com, who gladly and courteously host the show. Thank you, Paula and Neil, and Anne, who sets up the other stations around the world. Thank you for everyone for listening in, no matter where you are, who you are, whatever you are, to the next hour of, well, whatever happens. This is Thomas Sheridan again. My website is thomassheridanarts.com. You can get a link to everything there, my blog, my art pages. If you want to support me, you can buy a book. I'm always grateful for that. I'd rather sell you something that gives you knowledge and opens your mind up than just, get a donation or anything like that. If you have no money, that's okay. If you just share the pages, I don't need your money. Just to say thank you, and that's great. Now, tonight I want to talk about orcs. Now, I know they're a fictional creature. I know they're a fictional, concept within the work of J.R.R. Tolkien's novels and his body of work. But like all mythology, and let's be honest here, the man did create a living mythology with his work. They're always reflective of truths in the real world. Much of the work in Tolkien is derived from Scandinavian and particularly Finnish mythology. So there's always those elements of those threads of truth come passing through. And I want to begin by reading this section from a book. It's one of the most prized and beautiful books in my personal collection. It's Tolkien, The Illustrated Encyclopedia by David Day, a stunningly beautiful book, and a very well written one too. And let me read this passage to you, and then I will talk about this in the concept of what's happening to humanity as a whole and why we seem to be, falling asunder. Within the deepest pits of Untumno, in the first age of the stars, it was said that Melkor committed his greatest blasphemy. For in that time he captured many of the newly risen race of elves, and took them to his dungeon, and with hideous acts of torture he made ruined and terrible forms of life. From these he bred a goblin race of slaves, who were as loathsome as elves were fair. They were the Orcs, a multitude brought forth in shapes twisted by pain and hate. Their only joy of these creatures was the pain of others, for the blood that flowed within the Orcs was black and cold. Their stunted form was a hideous bent, bow-legged and squat. Their arms were long and strong as the apes of the south, and their skin was black as wood that had been charred by flame. The jagged fangs in their wide mouths were yellow, their tongues red and thick, and their nostrils and faces were broad and flat. Their eyes were crimson gashes like narrow slits in black iron grates behind which hot coals burn. These orcs were fierce warriors, for they feared more greatly their master than any enemy. And perhaps death was preferable to the torment of orcish life. They were cannibals, and often their rending claws and slavering fangs were gored with bitter flesh and the foul black blood of their own kind. They were fearful of light, for it weakened and burned them. Their lives were night-seeing, and they were dwellers of foul pits and tunnels. More quickly than any other being of Arda, their progeny came forth from the spawning pits. At the end of the first age of stars, when the war of powers in which the Valar came to Untumno and broke it open, they bound Melkor with a great chain and destroyed his servants in Untumno, and with them most of the Orcs. In the ages that followed were the great migrations of the Elves, and though Orcs lived in dark places of Middle-earth, they did not appear openly, and the Elven history spoke of the Orcs not until the fourth age of stars. By this time the Orcs had grown troublesome. Out of the Agband they came in armour of steel plate and beaked helmets of iron. They carried scimitars, poisoned daggers, arrows, and broad-headed swords. This brigand race, with wolves and werewolves, dared in the fourth age of stars to enter the realm of Beleriand, where the Sindarin kingdom of Melaran and Thingol stood. As these elves did not use steel weapons at the time, they came to the dwarfsmiths and bartered for weapons of tempered steel. They were slaughtered, the orcs. Then they slaughtered the orcs or drove them away. Yet when Melkor returned out of his pits of Agband, the orcs came, rank upon rank, legion upon legion, in open war in the valley of the river Gelion. They were met by Thingol's grey elves and Denethor's green elves. In the first battle, the orcs were decimated. A second army of orcs arose and overran the western lands of Beleriand and besieged the Falas. But the cities of the Faltrim did not fall, so the second army of orcs joined the third army and marched north to Mithrim to slay the northern elves. But in the strength of the body of Noldor were far beyond the darkest dreams of the orcs. And though the Noldor king Fëanor was slain, the second and third armies of Melkor were entirely destroyed. When the first age of the sun began, the ambitions of the orcs were checked by the new light of the sun. Soon, however, under cover of darkness, orcs came in, yet another grand army. In the glorious battle, the orc legions were slaughtered again, yet Melkor's might grew, for by dark sorcery he bred more of the orc race, and also dragons, balrogs, trolls, and werewolves. When he deemed himself ready, the mighty host came into battle of the sudden flame, and the elven lords were defeated. At the time of Tol Siron fell, the kingdoms of Hithlum, Mithrim, Dot Lomarin, and Dotus Horonian were overrun. The battle of the unnumbered tears was fought, and the Elvens and Endarn were completely defeated. At the battle of Tum Halad, Nargothrond was sacked. Menegroth was twice overrun, and the grey elf lands were ruined. Finally, Gondolin and the hidden kingdoms fell, so Melkor's victory was complete. Yet the terror of that age finally came to an end, for the Valar and the Maiar and the Vanyar and the Noldor of Tirion all came out of the undying lands, and the great battle was joined. In it Agband was destroyed, and all of Beleriand fell into the boiling sea. Melkor was cast out in the void for evermore. Still the orcs survived, for part of the race lay hidden in the fell dens beneath dark mountains and hills. There they bred. Eventually they came to Melkor's general Sauron, and he became their new master. They served Sauron well in the war of Sauron and the Elves, and in all his battles until the War of the Last Alliance, when the Second Age ended with the fall of Mordor and most of the Orcish race again being exterminated. Yet in the Third Age of the Sun, those orcs hidden in dark and evil places lived on. Masterless, the orcs raided and ambushed for many centuries, until the great evil eye, Sauron, reappeared. Their pair first grew in Mirkwood, then in the Misty Mountains. In 1300, the Naguls reappeared in Mordor and the realm of Agmar in northern Erendor, and the orcs flocked to them. After 600 years of terror, Agmar fell, but the evil realm of Minas Morgul arose in Gondor, and there again the orcs increased, with those of Mirkwood and the Misty Mountains and Mordor for the next 1,000 years. In that time, Sauron made a new breed of greater orcs. In the year 2475, these creatures, the Uruk-hai, came out of Mordor and sacked Osgiliath, the greatest city of Gondor. They were orcs grown to the height of men, yet straight-limbed and strong, though they were truly orcs, black-skinned, black-blooded, lynx-sized, fanged, and claw-handed. Uruk-hai did not fear sunlight. In the centuries that follows, the Uruk-hai and the lesser orcs made alliances with the Dundalings, the Balcots, and the Wain Raiders, the Haradim, the Easterlings of Rhûn, and the Corsairs of Umbar. In the year 1980, Moria was taken by the mighty Balrog demon. With him were the orcs of the Misty Mountains, who had come to inhabit the ancient dwarvish city, heaping contempt upon the dwarvish people and slaying whoever came near this ancient realm. Yet in the north, this was to be the undoing of the orcs, for the dwarves were so enraged that they cared not what they for the orcs were so enraged they cared not at what cost they would have revenge. So it was in that from 2793 to 2799 there was waged a 7 years war of extermination called the Wars of the Dwarves and the Orcs. In the war, though it cost the dwarves dearly, almost all the orcs of the Misty Mountains were slain, and at the east gate of Moria the terrible battle of Azalum-Bazar was fought, when the head of the orc general Azog was impaled on a stake. In the year 2941, after the death of the dragon Smog, all the orc warriors of Grundabad came to Eredbor, and the battle of the 5 armies was fought beneath the lonely mountain. The orcs were led by Bolog of the North, son of Azog, and he wished to have his vengeance upon the dwarves, but all he achieved was his own death and that of all his warriors. In the War of the Ring, the last great conflict of the Third Age of the Sun, the orcish legions fought everywhere, yet all was to be resolved in one last battle before the Black Gate. All the forces of Mordor gathered there at Sauron's command. They fell on the army of the captains of the West. However, at that very moment, the one ring of power which held all of Sauron's dark world in sway was destroyed. The mightiest servants of Sauron were consumed in fire. The Dark Lord became black smoke, dispelled by the west wind, and the orcs perished like straw before flame. Though some survived, they never again rose in great numbers, but dwindled and became a minor goblin folk, possessed of but a rumour of their ancient evil power. Now, why am I bringing this up again and talking about this in this way? Well, in many ways, I'm starting to see reality mirroring the story of the orcs within J.R. Tolkien's works. Every time beauty, creativity, and a shift in consciousness in a more enlightened sense happens in humanity, some of the people who are part of this evolution, they are captured by Dark Lords and they are made poisoned, and they become the orcs of the human world. They become orcificated, or orcicized, or whatever you want to say it, how you want to put it, or orcish. You look at things like, say, the Russian Revolution. It initially started as people there, the serfs, lived in poverty. So most poor people supported that. They were being transformed from serfs into a better standard of person. So a kind of a rise of their own elvish being was taking place. But in stepped the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks made the revolution corrupt and dark. And eventually the orcs took over, and that's what produced all these, crazy murderers and the NKPV. And this story has happened all through history. Every time a movement organically now, or a scene appears which holds great promise of beauty, people within it are played upon, their emotions, their psychology, their neuroses, their fear, and they are made orcish. And they're very difficult because they are driven only by their desire to corrupt the others who have not become orcish, because it takes their mind over their own view of themselves. To stop this once it starts, it becomes a kind of malignancy within a society, a community, a group. It'll be a psychopath or a group of psychopaths who initially implements a black psychopathic magi, shall we say, who initially implements this growth, or this, shall we say, co-opting of people who are forming, evolving and turning them into orcish types creatures. And then they become prisoners of their own, condition, knowing in their heart that there's no other way out. So what they do is they attack the ones who are not like this in order to grow their numbers. And the frightening thing is they sometimes do. I was watching the film, the old Vincent Price film, one of his better films, perhaps his best performance, Witchfinder General, which was made, I think, in around 66, 67 in England. And it's loosely based on the Puritan Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, during the English Civil War. And it shows the same idea. You had genuine groups within England at that time, within the New Model Army, such as the Levellers, who produced the first ever basic document of human civil rights and fought under Oliver Cromwell, believing that they would bring England into a new age, a more enlightened, fair, kind and decent age. And that's why most of these men fought in the parliamentary forces in the New Model Army, the world's first professional army, and they formed the Levellers. But what happens was, it was made orcish, because when you had the killing of Charles II, and I'm not taking sides in this, I'm just pointing out what happens, it creates a system of hate. It creates hate, and hate is a drug. When people are consumed by hate, it is worse than heroin or crack or, meth addictions. It totally consumes a person. And if they cannot get revenge at the monster which they damaged them, or they perceive to damage them, they will start taking it out on the person nearest to them. And if they don't get that satisfaction, they don't get that fix, then they move on to someone else, and they move on to someone else, and it becomes an endless witch hunt. And that's what that film was about, because of the failure of, as it was happening, the hopes and the realization of the English Civil War, that the Levellers were not going to get what they wanted, and Oliver Cromwell was a religious nutcase, that the Witchfinder Generals step in and they start finding witches and torturing, murdering innocent people. Not only does the hate grow, but it also becomes profitable. You go into a community and you extort a kind of protection racket. Do not pick on our town, burn the odd witch, but here's some money and feck off and leave us alone. And this is how the orcish powers grow within our world and in our society. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what you call the sheeple. It's a term I don't like and I don't use. But if you look around you and you look at the websites, you see things, you see the behaviour. Compare, like, I think Dick Dees, or Richard Dees, whatever his name is, the guy who does those amazing illustrations. He has a picture of America in the 1950s, and it's very kind of like, attractive and stylish, and then a photograph of America today, and it's all like grossly obese people waving American flags, eating like triple cheeseburgers and standing outside a Walmart. That's the same idea. Whenever something amazing happens, the orcs take over. Now, I'm not blaming these people. I'm saying, if you look at those websites like the people of Walmart, if you look at all these kinds of things on the Jerry Springer show, on the Jeremy Kyle show in the UK, you see these orcs. They are there. And the problem is that they manifest, and if they don't have their addictions fed, they seek new targets. When I first wrote Puzzling People back in 2011, I was not a member of anything. I've never been a member of clubs or anything like that for the most part. And I just wrote a book about psychopaths. And the first group to pick me up were basically what you would call the truth movement or the alternative movement after I did Red Ice. And I'll always be very grateful to Henrik and the rest of the crew at Red Ice for opening that door for me. And I suddenly got a lot of attention. I was asked to do speaking dates in England and in Ireland, and it took off very quickly for me. And my first initial impressions of what they call the truth movement, or the alternative movement, it was a beautiful thing. I was meeting so many nice people. I was meeting people who were decent, hard-working, good-natured, kind people for the most part, who were just trying to make sense of why the world is run by psychopaths, why things don't seem to make sense, why nothing seems to work the way it should, why mass media gives them one message and then does the precise opposite. Now, I taught, and I was introducing them to concepts like gaslighting, and they got to learn about all that. And I got to tell them about my time working in corporate communications on Wall Street, how I saw how the system was developed, and how these people deliberately do these things. They deliberately sow seeds of chaos in your mind in order to create confusion. And that confusion creates two different things. It creates one group of people who are very, very confused and disheartened, and it creates another group of people who are very, very hostile and angry. And because the people who are hostile and angry cannot get direct effect, or cannot directly attack, hurt, or damage the people in charge, they begin to feed on the other side. This becomes the cannibalism of the orcs, which Tolkien spoke about in that passage I just read you. They become that they start feeding on their kin. And this creates a situation of fear. And the situation of fear is that these people who are feeding on their kin stop the ones who are kind-hearted, decent, and just want to get on with their lives from opening their mouths for fear that they will be fed on upon next. Now, I told you when I arrived at these talks, I did one event in Dublin in 2011, I think it was, or early 2012, the Economic Hitman event, and I really thought that the whole world was going to change right there and then. The hotel ballroom was filled with about 500 people, and many of them were business people, the people in power, the people who can change things, the people with a bit of money, the people with a bit of moxie. The guys running the operation were the kind of people who could do it. They were working in business. They were people who understood the world, and like anyone else, they were trying to find answers, and they're putting their money and their names and their mouth and their time in this, and they were really nice folks, and I had a really nice time with them. And I remember sitting in a hotel in West Dublin with all of them, and there was people like, there was other people there, in I was only just starting out, I was a nobody, but other people were there, and I had such a smile on my face. I said, my God, we're really going to change the world here. We really got some wonderful people who are going to change everything. But there was also a small minority within these events who expected to get in for free, who were playing all the usual dead ends, straw man, sovereign, no name. We're always looking for a quick fix. I couldn't understand what they were doing there. They seemed quite sneaky and quite devious to me. And they were a small, tiny minority now at this time. And what I noticed most of all is that they were opportunists, but very quick to cast slurs upon other people. And they would be the ones who would go to these events, and then, or not even go to them, but report about them or check them out, and then very viciously begin attacking the speakers at these events, which is probably fair game in terms of criticism, because you should always question who's standing on a stage giving orders. You should always ask questions about people who are put out there in the media, mainstream and otherwise. There's nothing wrong with that. But there seemed to be a specific viciousness who were very interested in people's personal lives. Now, when that had no effect, they then migrated and their numbers grew because hate is like a drug, and junkies will always go where the biggest drugs are to be found. That's why you'll always have the junkies where the drugs are. You will always have the haters where the hate is. And so they started picking on the speakers at first. When they got no satisfaction there, then they began picking on the organisers, saying terrible things about them online, calling them agents and shills, and none of them were anything like that. These are people who genuinely wanted to help the human race. And because of this, the group in Dublin that was organising these events no longer exists. I'm not going to name them. I know they listen to my show and they'll appreciate what I'm saying. But one of the guys who was the head of it, or at the head of it, I spoke to recently, and he said he wants nothing to do with the truth movement ever again because of all the rotten individuals that he encountered within it. And this is an enormous, enormous tragedy, because these were good people that we needed. So he was picked on. He has to worry about his career, his family, his reputation. His colleagues are picked on. All good people, they're picked on. So when that feeding frenzy had ended and they got that, and their numbers have grown, the orcs within this so-called truth movement then decided to pick on people in the audience. I saw them filming anyone who looked like they were successful, happy, well-adjusted, and were putting their pictures up on the internet saying, who is this guy? He must be a shill. He must be in the police. Who is this woman? She's too well dressed. What's she doing here? And the result of this now is that all the good people, I'd say 90% of them, are gone. They're completely gone. And what we have are the absolute dregs of humanity, the scum of the earth, the vicious, cold-blooded, heartless, indecent, nasty and repugnant orcs in the so-called truth movement running the agenda now. It could not have worked out better for the psychopaths in charge. It could not have worked out better for the globalists. They have the majority of the so-called truth movement attacking the truth movement, or people in it, around it, talking about it. Someone like myself, who's not one of them, but has a following, or had a following among them, which I was very happy to have, were attacked. We're attacked constantly. While the psychopaths in charge, the globalists, they sit there and it's business as usual. Business as usual. While these cannibals continue to feed. Hate. Hate is the drug that consumes them. Some of them have fallen into the neo-Nazi element. It's Jews this, Jews that. The behaviour of Israel in Gaza last summer didn't help there, of course. Netanyahu and the other psychopaths in the Knesset dropping bombs on Gaza is not actually going to win, great public support among people who want peace. But it also acts as a catalyst. It also gives these orcs within the movement who become neo-Nazis an excuse to find a new scapegoat. And the witch-finder generals come up, and of course the Jews have always been a classic one to pick on. Very easy to pick on. Basically because Jews are smarter, more intelligent. They've had to be like this to survive 1,000 years of pogroms in Europe. And they've put themselves at the head of the media, because if they didn't, they'd probably be burning in concentration camps again. And that's what I admire about Jewish people. They don't lie down playing the victim complex. They get up there and they also put themselves in positions of power. I don't see anything wrong with that. If the maggots in the truth movement were actually to follow the same line, they'd actually get things. But no, that takes hard work. That takes creativity. That takes dedication. They won't do that. They're orcs. And for me even saying this, I will have the most despicable comments said about me. I'm a Zionist, I'm pro-Israel, I'm pro-nothing other than the human race. And I can't affect anything outside my country or even my community than what's here. I can't. So I'm not interested in what goes on in the Middle East other than I'm disgusted when innocent people of both sides are killed. I make no apology for this. I don't even like when military people are killed, because ultimately they're fighting a globalist war over who gets to mine NATO's oil in the Middle East. That's all it comes down to. It's very easy to take sides in a situation like that. I don't take sides in situations like that. I only take sides against human decency. I know what goes on in Netanyahu and the Knesset is psychopathic and scum. But I also know that, being an Irish person, I had to deal with all kinds of slurs and searches going to England during the height of the IRA bombing campaign, because if you were an Irish person, particularly a young guy in England at that period, by default you were in the IRA and were planting a bomb somewhere. So I don't do that game. So the maggots, the orcs of the truth movement have infected it. They've infected this corpse and they're growing. And there's no signs that anyone will take them on. Because, let's be honest, this is a business. This is a business for many. You know what I'm saying? They sit there and they would never in a million years do the unspeakable act of treachery that I do by telling you how I fucking feel about things honestly. I will never lie to you. If I change my mind on a subject, I will tell you. If I reevaluate my feelings towards a topic, I will tell you. I will never shut my mouth and feed the addictions in order to keep that donate button blinking like an epileptic on speed. Because that's what many of your truth gurus who validate your truth, your hate, want. They are your pushers. And I will never, ever, ever be a pusher of any fear drugs. If you don't like what I have to say, you tune out. Now this week I posted, as a bit of satire, which I'm proud of by the way, a joke video of termites taking down the World Trade Center. And nano-termites. We're long enough away from the tragedy now that we can look back and have a laugh at it. It also allowed me to make a statement I thought was quite obvious about the increasing absurdity of the conspiracy theories. There's one lunatic who thinks it was a hurricane was harvested and fired at New York. There are others who talk about holograms. When a lie has to get inflated, when a story has to get inflated, extrapolated, and built upon, it's a lie. The truth is simple. The truth is very simple. I never really talked about 9/11 because I know even from the very beginning, and I know there's plenty of conspiracies around that thing. I just don't know fully what they are, so I keep my mouth shut. I'm not walking into a minefield that's been laid by the CIA in the form of conspiracy experts. I think I'm that thick. You may be when you're running there going, I truly believe what this guy is telling me. This guy, I don't know his name, who the hell he is. I truly believe him because, he says namaste at the end of the videos. I'm not that stupid. You're stupid. You're an idiot. And the day will come when you'll only have your own reflection in the mirror after years of calling people shills and Zionists and sheeples and satanic pedophiles. And you'll be staring at that mirror, and the only thing you'll have left in this world will be those two dead eyes, your pale face, and your twitching eyebrows staring right back at you, because everyone had long moved on, because they were sick of the sight of your endless whinging, moaning, and finger pointing. I know better than anyone that this world is run by psychopaths, but I'm fucked if I'm going to let them take the sunshine from my eyes, take away my ability to love a beautiful sunset, to enjoy my relationships, my friends, to create beautiful art, to enjoy movies, to read, to explore mythology, literature, to see this beautiful planet. That's all that interests me from this point on. I've no interest in anything else other than to enjoy life, because it's a short journey and there's a lot of hate, and I don't want to eat it up with that kind of crap. You can. Well, let me tell you, no junkie has ever gotten better by scoring more frequently. Remember that one. We are supposed to lead by example. The way we lead by example is not by becoming orcs. The way we lead by example is not to be constantly looking for shills, Zionists, enemies, heretics. The way to lead by example is to show people you're a regular human being who enjoys life, has a laugh, creates, looks well grounded, and there's almost none of them left in the truth movement now. Almost none. You had your chance, you turned into orcs, and you salivated and ripped all the decent people apart and out of the movement with your madness and your hysteria. And now all you've got is your own few handful of yourselves now savaging each other and anyone else you can find. And eventually they won't be standing beside you either. That complete stranger on YouTube or Facebook who has a fake name and a fake ID, who you trust completely because they confirm your bias, could very well be a CIA agent, an MI5 agent, a copper, or God love you, even a Mossad agent. And there you are going on about Jews this, Jews that, and he's taking down everything you ever said and then telling you he agrees with you, and you haven't got a clue who this person is, but you're so stupid, you're so consumed by hate and so desperate for your next fix that you trust that, because increasingly you don't have real people around you to depend upon. You're losing your friends. You're losing the people who loved you because they can't stand you anymore. You're losing the people who you need as real allies, decent, good people. They won't have anything to do with you. It's just you screaming into the keyboard. And what's the end result in that? Like I said, no junkie ever got better by trying to score more. That's it. You do not want the truth. You want confirmation bias. If you do not get confirmation bias, you invent fantasies. Apparently, I am now a Zionist because I once worked for Goldman Sachs. Amazing. I also used to deliver pizza, so I must be in the fucking mafia as well. That's how stupid and retarded you are. That's how pathetic you are. And I'll tell you why you're pathetic. Because most of you who are like this have never had full lives. You have no idea of what it is to be an ambitious person. You have no idea what it is to be raised in a fucking slum and then to have to drag yourself out by your fucking claws and make your way through this life with whatever little talents and personality you have. You will die in the same hole in which you were born. And along the way, all you have done is isolated thousands of people who could have enriched and given you a better life. That's all you're ever going to get. Is that what you want? Because let me tell you, there's plenty of them out there who'll give it to you. Well, I'm I'm George this, that or the other from theearthisflat.com, and I'm going to present evidence that the earth is flat. Then you go online and you go, the earth is flat. Yeah, I just found out the earth is flat. I found out the earth is flat. If your truth gurus, if these people you look up to were actually standing for truth, they would say, hold on a second. You're fucking delusional. I can only think of myself and Niall Murphy who've come out and made a point of this. And of course, both of us have been attacked by your heroes who know you're a nut job, who know you've lost your mind. They know you're psychotic. But unlike me, people like myself and Paul, they're not going to come... Niall. They're not going to come out and say to you, hold on a second, you look like a nutcase. No, they're going to either say nothing or they'll go, how interesting. Donate button, click, 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 click. Yeah, the donate button, click, 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 is flying. And you think you think these people are your heroes, these are your truth gurus? They're your pushers. They're pushing on you a drug. They're feeding your habit. That's all they're doing. They don't care about you. They care about what you can do for them. So they make sure that your addiction is flying. They make sure that you're always chasing that dragon. And they don't care. They'll never stand up for anyone. I mean, I'll tell you something. I've truly found out who my friends are in this movement, and so do others. And these are the kind of people I want to roll with from now on. I'm not interested in that. I want to take these people out of the truth movement and build something else. I think it was Niall who called them the third way pirates. That's a good one. Bohemian X was another term I came up with. It doesn't matter. We don't even need a name. But you're over. It's finished. You're never going to save the world from globalists by getting all psychotic, hysterical, and wrapped up in 9/11. You're not even going to save yourself, my friends. You're going to destroy yourselves. You're going to waste an awful lot of energy. You're going to waste an awful lot of time, and there will be no resolution. I have been a ardent, very proud, and very intensive conspiracy theorist since the day I finished reading the book In God's Name by David Yallop back in the 1980s. That book changed my life. I am a conspiracy theorist. I am very much interested in and want to explore conspiracy theory. But that's not the same thing as believing in conspiracy theory. Just because I go in and look at something doesn't mean I have to automatically believe it. And I'm certainly not going to believe it to keep a donate button going. I don't play that game. I look at all conspiracies. I look at them all without emotion, without hysteria, and I certainly don't go by videos that go inside job or false flag or crisis actor, Illuminati 666. I don't do that. I don't do that crap. I don't do things. I go back and I look at both sides of the argument. The official and the alternative. I think about it. I let it stew in my mind. I take several times to think about it, and then I say, it doesn't look like a false flag to me. Like Charlie Hebdo in Paris. It didn't look like it. It was all hinged on the assumption that this guy's head should have exploded when the bullet hit him. The bullet from the AK-47 clearly missed the guy's head. You can see it hitting the sidewalk. But that didn't matter. Pictures of people in terror or cops that had just been shot, phoning their families or for backup, are suddenly taking selfies. The truth is simple and direct. A lie is always told in the form of a saga, and a saga that builds upon itself. I was the one that came out and said that. I didn't believe it. Doesn't look like Charlie Hebdo was an inside job to me. It looks like what it is, an old-fashioned terrorist thing. I was attacked for that. It doesn't bother me. You can say whatever you want for me. Look, get it into your head. Attacking me or anyone else, the very tiny numbers of people who you call shills in this movement, because we don't follow the conspiracy mainline donate button, click and get me some money a story, will not make what you believe a fact. You understand that? It will not make it a fact. The truth is the truth, and hysteria doesn't bring it to the fore. It just doesn't. And if it was a false flag, or anything is a conspiracy for real, it's only a matter of time for the orcs in this movement. They start savaging the people who are looking at it objectively, because they're not looking at it hysterically enough, or viciously, or making fools of themselves enough. That's why I think a lot of these types are also, if they're not agents themselves, they're being groomed by agents who are feeding their psychosis. It really is that simple. There are websites run by lunatics who talk to... There are alternative news websites run by lunatic criminals on the run who have unbiased opinion written on it. This is what we're up against. I watched the documentary last night, Going Clear, about Scientology. And it actually made me cry, because what I saw was that truth movement. And I especially saw and felt a great deal of sympathy for John Travolta, who I just thought was just another idiot Scientologist. And it turns out that when he was a young guy, an emerging elf, should we say, starting out in acting, the orcs of Scientology got to him early on, and clearly got what all cults want from people: dirt. They look for dirt, and they got some pretty juicy dirt on poor John Travolta, and they've kept him a prisoner of that cult ever since. And the reason why he hasn't come out has been quite frightening, because look, this guy's lost a child and everything. But at one point, he rescued a woman and a child from Scientology who were being abused in the cult. But he couldn't leave because they had dirt on him, because like all cults, you're expected to confess at the beginning. And he confessed something that he can't take back. Tom Cruise, on the other hand, is just a piece of shit psychotic. I have no time for him. But poor John Travolta, in many ways, represents the people that were at the start of that so-called truth movement, the ones that I'd met at those early events. Good-hearted, decent, honest people who wanted to do the right thing. But the orcs of the so-called truth movement got dirt on them. And the dirt could be little more than taking a photograph of him, putting it up online and saying, "Who is this shill?" And then the other orcs come scuttering in for their hate fix. Another fix, chasing that truth dragon. You think that's a decent way to behave? You think that's normal? You think that's going to win you any happiness in this life? Let's talk about Charlie Veitch for a second. Charlie Veitch was the Jesus Christ of the truth movement for two reasons. One, Charlie Veitch coveted fame, and two, you gave it to him. You needed a Jesus. You needed a truth leader. You needed that. You craved it. You wanted it, because it took power away. It took it took the need for you to have power in yourself away from yourself. You have to have your gurus, because you can't lead yourself. And when he betrayed you by saying he no longer believed, and I'm saying he's a dodgy character. If there's one person who probably is an absolute crisis actor, we can prove it with him with that early Goldman Sachs video, or wherever he was, not Goldman Sachs, whatever bank, where he's actually putting down the revolution, as he calls it. He's probably a prototype for Russell Brand, for all we know, an experimental prototype. But when he did that, I was shocked by the level of hatred towards him, because these people, like the Orcs, were not particularly hating Charlie Veitch. They were hating themselves for being so stupid, for being led by him, because they handed over their power. You let that one sink in. And it went so psychotic and depraved. They were saying disgusting things about his baby, his girlfriend's baby, when she was born, an innocent child. Motherfuckers who called themselves spiritual, the truthers, not sheeple, saying the most depraved thing about an unborn baby in a woman's womb, all for their 9/11 obsession. Are you proud to be part of something like that? I wouldn't be. And then people wonder how a lot of them ended up supporting the Nazis, are now neo-Nazi groups. A junkie never gets better by seeking more and more fixes. A junkie only dies, alone, in squalor, in a slum somewhere, staring at their own reflection in a mirror. Until that bag is zipped up on them and they're forgotten forever. In the film Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, there's a pivotal scene in the film that is by that amazing man from Hong Kong, philosopher, actor, martial arts genius, where he's in a hall of mirrors and he's trying to determine where his adversary is, who has a claw he's slashing him with. He cannot tell which is the reflection and which is the real adversary, until he realizes that the real battle is not between him and the bad guy, but it's finding the demarcation line between where Bruce Lee ends and his adversary begins. And the only way he can do that is by smashing the mirror and emerging from the inside of himself. And that's what's wrong with you. You're all in a hall of mirrors. You've created imaginary adversaries, and you don't know, and you're determined not to know, who are the real adversaries and who are the imaginary reflections of adversaries. And you will not break that mirror because you still haven't got the guts to look in that mirror and look at your own reflection honestly. Because if you did, if you looked at your reflection honestly, if you looked at why you have this need to rout out shills, Jews, Zionists, satanic paedophile baby eaters everywhere. If you looked at that and began to realize that you're like this because you have not worked on yourself, the first thing you would do would be look at your own reflection in that mirror and put your fist right through it. Smash it to 1,000 pieces and then begin to emerge spiritually, psychologically, mythologically, and independently, and with human decency from within inside yourself. But you won't do that because it's easier to chase the phantoms on the mirror like a line of junkies' coke across a mirror. You don't want to evolve. You don't want to create. You don't want to be original. You don't have the guts to do it. You're impotent. You're sad. You're alone. You are dead. You are an orc. I don't want you like this. I want you to be a good person. I want you to be my friend. I want you to join me on this magical journey through life. This magical journey of discovery, wonder, disappointment, failure, heartbreak, love, misery, creativity, adventure, and joy. I want you onside me. I want you there with me. I want to be there with you. I want us all to be mates. I always want us all to sit down and have a pint, have a laugh, take the piss out of each other. You're not going to be able to do that, my friend, in a room with a mirror and only your toxic reflection and imaginary phantoms looking at you. I want you here. I want you to be with us. I don't want to lead you. I want to be beside you. That's all I want. I ask nothing from you. It's really that simple. We all need friends, and the more friends we have, the happier we have. The more happier we are, the better we look to other people, because we're not attacking each other. When we're not attacking each other, we have confidence. Then we bring in the people that we need on our side. Then the globalists get really worried when they see happy, smiling people, well adjusted, having a laugh, having a drink, not taking them too seriously, but very well aware that the world is run by psychopaths, and more importantly, not allowing themselves to be placed in a state of fear, paranoia, vindictiveness, and witchfinder general by it. And that's all I have to say. Break this mirror and emerge from within and stop being an orc, because there's no ever escaping that once it gets too far. If you really stand for the truth, you stand for flexibility of your opinions of others, because being wrong about something is wisdom, because it teaches you, and you learn how to be better and not make those mistakes again. Being in a state of denial that you could ever be wrong and dogmatic only makes you an orc. You deserve better. Stop being an orc. This is Thomas Sheridan. Thank you for the past hour on the Velocity of Now here on realitybitesradio.com and other stations around the world. www.thomassheridanarts.com, and feck 'em if they can't